is NTV.
Good evening, viewers. You are welcome to this talk show on the linkages between climate change, gender, and poverty reduction. And this show is coming at a time when globally and in Uganda, we are celebrating the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And in Uganda and around the world, we know that there are efforts to combat gender-based violence, but these are being affected by climate change. In Uganda, we have seen that, for example, in Budoda, we have seen landslides, we have seen people losing lives, we have seen famine, and all these are coming as a result of climate change. And so, and because of climate change, we see that GBV is on the increase. At least there are studies to demonstrate this. So today we will spend some time exploring this topic. And I would like to here to bring in the Director of Environmental Affairs, Mr. Mafabi. Mr. Mafabi, given what I've highlighted about climate change and gender-based violence, can you tell us your experience in Uganda? What are the communities in wetlands facing in terms of gender-based violence and climate change?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, we need to develop the link between human beings and the natural resources. We know that Uganda is a nature-based economy. More than 70% of our people depend on agriculture, and agriculture is rain-fed. So the moment you have any problem within the weather patterns like we've experienced over the last few years, we've seen that production actually goes down, and that in a way begins to affect the way people relate with the natural resources. But specifically, as climate change has been setting in, we are seeing that a number of things are happening. One, we are beginning to see the dwindling of the resources, and that brings in the issue of equity between the men and women. And in our society here in Uganda, we know that for most of these enterprises, it is the men that normally take the lead. So as they dwindle, we begin to see the challenges of that result eventually into gender-based violence. So as the communities and the resilience begins to decline as a result, of course, of the climate change, we begin to see that women and girls have to walk long distances. First of all, to collect water, and also to collect firewood. And of course, they are subject to all types of hostilities within the community. You have heard about rape and all this. Again, it's because they have to walk those long distances. Why? Because of the declining natural resource space.
This is what you are sharing is very interesting and a point of concern indeed. What is the government of Uganda and your ministry in particular doing about these challenges? What is it doing to address these challenges?
Well, the government has put in place a number of policy guidelines. Recently, the government adopted the irrigation policy. And the irrigation policy basically is aimed at helping to ensure that communities have access to water for production. And we believe that once they have access to water for production, it should reduce the stress that comes with the climate change. But also with support from the UNDP and the Green Climate Fund, the government has just initiated a program for 8 years for wetland restoration in 20 districts of Uganda. And the main focus of this is really to restore the integrity of the wetlands so that they can provide a regular supply of water. But also that we provide alternative livelihoods to reduce the pressure on the wetlands. And in this process, we focus so much on the issue of equity, and we have ensured that there's we have actually engendered all our programs under that project.
This sounds interesting, Mr. Mafadi. Now I'd like to Tina, given your experience in issues of addressing gender-based violence in Uganda, as a person who has participated in work around this and from the Center for Domestic Violence Prevention, in your experience, what works to address issues of gender inequality and gender-based violence and violence against women and girls?
In his address, Mr. Mafavi talked about the inequality that there is between men and women. That's where the root of the problem is. And then it's made worse by these other factors like the long distances, the pressures that come with coping with life after the livelihoods have been destroyed. So programs that work to address the inequality, transforming the power relations between the two, will lead us to more equitable sharing of resources. And then secondly, mitigation factors when it comes to the livelihood component. Both men and women need to be engaged in a more transformational way that is looking at equitable income generation for both, where they both have a say, they both are making decisions and benefiting from that income, as well as mitigating factors. If someone has been abused, if they've been raped or beaten, there has to be response mechanisms.
Is there a specific model that you have been using to address issues of gender-based violence?
Yes.
Okay.
In Uganda, we are very innovative, which is very lovely. We have homegrown approaches. One of them is called SASA, where my organization has been part of with our partner Raising Voices.
Can you explain what SASA is about and how it works?
It's about working with both men and women and everyone across the social spectrum, including elders, police, health, justice system, the churches, to transform how they are thinking about women and men. Also to give them skills to learn how do men and women relate in an equitable way? How do you solve problems in a non-violent way? And then how do you ration that power in a manner that is beneficial to all? So it's about power, having it and sharing it equally, and also holding whoever is using violence accountable to that. So it's called SASA. It's a homegrown approach. And there are many more others, like there's the GREAT program and many more others.
Okay. Thank you, Tina. And now I would like to move to Diego, who is from the United Nations Development Program and who is a policy analyst and working on issues of GBV and the environment. Given your experience in supporting partners around the world to address GBV and climate change, can you share some lessons from which Uganda can learn and the linkages between climate change and gender-based violence?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question, Paul. So UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, works in many countries and covers many development issues. We work on governance, on poverty reduction, on environment and climate change mitigation. And what we say to our partners is that they need to take into account the effects those interventions have on the power dynamics in the households, on the social norms. What we mean by social norm is, for example, the acceptability of beating your wife, of seeing violence against women in your community. That's something that you need to take into account. And you need, in any intervention, in any of these topics, to, first of all, do no harm. And that's what Tina was saying about the mitigation measures. And we also say to our partners, any intervention can also have a great potential to transform those social norms and to address the root causes of violence against women, which are gender inequalities. So, for example, in the intervention we will be carrying out with the Ministry of Water and Environment, we are going to look at what are the effects of the actions that have been planned on women and girls and the relations they have with men and boys, and how we can take advantage of their interventions in the wetlands to transform in a positive way those social norms so that you have more equitable communities and hence more resilient communities.
Tina, thank you very much, Diego. Tina, given what Diego has been explaining about addressing gender-based violence in the context of wetlands, in the context of climate change, do you have any examples of where SASA has worked effectively, where the SASA model you explained has worked effectively to address issues of gender-based violence?
Yes, SASA worked here in Kampala, and it's also working in many, many other parts of the world. Here in Uganda, it was able to reduce physical violence by 52%. That's superb. And then it was able to break the social acceptability of, the problem of, there's a lot of acceptance by 76%, which is also awesome. And then, again, it was able to create like more better relations between men and women and their children and their families, and also community action against violence. So, but we are yet to pilot it within the wetland to maybe learn how to adopt some of what worked into these wetlands. It's still a learning process.
Wow, thank you. I think thank you, Tina. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Diego. I think you have done a wonderful job to explain to our viewers gender-based violence and what it means and how it is linked to climate change, especially in our wetlands in Uganda. And I would like to thank you for all the views you have provided. I've been your host, Professor Paul Bukuluchi, from Makerere University, Department of Social Work and Social Administration. Thank you very much.